So Quinn, can you tell us a little bit about what prompted the creation of this piece?
Sure. So I think for me, this piece in this series came out of a couple of things. I think first it came out of a feeling of frustration, particularly within the ways in which we engage language in Evanston, the ways in which we discuss things about race, and the ways in which we discuss things about politics and the views or feelings that are felt towards some issues within the community, and some of the things that were considered solutions to some of the things that were considered, extra to solutions or things that were not worthy of engagement. And then I think in addition to that, I think sometimes the language that we can use or the thoughts that we engage really restrict our ability to develop a language or develop a way of thinking or speaking about blackness that exists beyond how we understand, people of color. And so what I wanted to do was start reading. It really came out of me reading and me thinking about what are different ways in which we can use language, what are different ways in which we can use thought to hopefully give us more paths towards a project that could hopefully reorient how we see ourselves positioned.
Mm-hmm. We got it. And can you tell us a little bit about why that title?
Sure. I think this title comes out of a lot of things for me. I think that, specifically within blackness, and when we think of blackness in politics, it's always in a process of getting, right? Getting rights, getting money, getting resources, getting, power. And then ultimately to get this very abstract idea of freedom or this very abstract idea of liberation. And I think that for me, that always frustrates me because I think it leads us to a certain degree of violence when there's just there are these very intangible understandings of what it is that we're actually trying to get. And so I hope that with this larger series, at least for myself, I could find ways in which all that is thought to be external to blackness is really found within blackness. We got it. And I think for me, there's always blackness is always existed in a way of what is more felt than what is said, and I think that is often communicated in the phrase, I got you, or I feel you, something that is not necessarily, doesn't express that I 100% understand the words that just came out of your mouth or the words that were written on paper in an objective sense, but rather I can sit in the blackness that we share together. I can sit in the feelings of pain and beauty and care that exist as blackness together in this process of mutual getting as opposed to searching or running or whatever else.
Mm-hmm. And then you also feature different voices in the piece like Eazy-E and Nikki Giovanni and Young Thug, and they each bring something different within the piece. So can you tell us a little bit about the meaning that those voices are conveying to your piece?
Sure. So I think for me, each one of these people have come into my life at very specific times and at very influential times, and have not only influenced the way that I think about blackness, but the ways in which I think about life, the ways in which I think about writing, the ways in which I think about reading, the ways in which I think about teaching, and have really, each of them, I think one thing that they all have in common is that they've represented a certain level of destruction in my life. I know Eazy-E destroyed what I thought could be music. He just, NWA and West Coast hip hop at that time destroyed what I thought could be put into a hip hop song. The types of language or the poetics that could be put, the types of things that could be said, the type of imagery that could be felt through song or through aesthetics or through all those things. That was a certain level of destruction. Nikki Giovanni destroyed what I thought could be history. Nikki Giovanni destroyed what I thought could be poetry. Nikki Giovanni destroyed what I thought could be, words and how they can be used and the power that words can have in truly evoking a level of feeling and play and care through words, influencing me, specifically the poem The Great Pax Whitey, to rethink the way in which I see myself in terms of, writing and reading. And then Young Thug destroyed what I thought could be not only music and what could be a song, just as a very general concept, but also the ways in which, language can be used in terms of sometimes you can understand an entire verse and not be able to make out one song, but rather just in terms of the like I said, the feeling that the song produces. And I think the three things that each of these people have in common is, the feeling. They all share a mutual feeling, which is a feeling of loving and caring for Blackness. But they all take that in very different directions, and they make it extremely personal to them. And so hopefully by speaking true to them, by staying true to them, I'll be able to, evoke that same feeling. But for me, using it is a way for me to feel my roots and acknowledge those who have influenced myself. So hopefully I can get to, hopefully if I work hard enough, if I try my best, I can get someplace close to what they're emulating, that level of feeling.
And so then in your piece, you say that for Blackness, words and communication have fundamentally shaped the Black radical performance and aesthetic, being able to convey feelings of love, joy, beauty, and terror, counter to the violence of the world. So can you talk a little bit about what qualifies as Black performance and aesthetic?
Yeah, I think the quick, and I think the truest answer is that everything Black is Black performance, everything Black is Black aesthetic. But I think what's more nuanced, and hopefully the way in which I try to nuance it, is nuance where and what facets Black aesthetic is seen as, and the quote-unquote appropriate places for certain types of Black performances, and the quote-unquote appropriate places for Black aesthetic. And I choose, and when I use the word aesthetic, I mean the images and the sounds and performances that I think, at least for me, are associated with Blackness when we think of Blackness. So I think, like, whenever you speak to a certain kind of time period for Blackness, Black aesthetic, for me, is always the first thing that I see with that. So if I think of the Civil Rights Movement, I think of specific songs, I think of specific visual artists, I think of specific photographs, I think of specific speakers, I think of specific, performances in that. The I Have a Dream speech, for one, like Motown in terms of songs, even if even if they're not happening at the exact same moment, the things that I associate in my mind, I think, is a different type of Black aesthetic. And so I choose to begin my investigation, or not even, investigation is not the right word, but I choose to begin my inquiries or my larger project of Blackness at the level of aesthetic, because I think it gives us, I think that Black aesthetic and Black performance give us a lot in terms of how we can build language and how we can build knowledge and how we can build ways in which we can rethink Blackness and rethink the ways in which we use language to convey Blackness. But I think that aesthetic also refuses to give us a lot as well. In addition to that, it refuses to give us clean answers. Black aesthetic and performance refuses to give us consistency. Black aesthetic and Black performance refuses to give us straight, clean-cut, objective answers that can be analyzed and picked apart. And I think that my biggest frustration with some of the language that we use to write in Blackness, specifically the language of, liberalism, and if we keep fighting for people of color, if we keep looking at discipline statistics, if we keep looking to arrest records, if we keep looking to the decreasing rate of Black people murdered by the police, I think that Black radical performance, Black aesthetic, tells us that doesn't make any sense, and that's not where we must begin. And I think starting with aesthetic and performance and the lives that Black people lead and the things that are spilling out of these moments of objectification, the things that are spilling out of these moments of confinement, is Black performance and Black aesthetic. And I think that shows us the true refusal that is Blackness. That shows us the resistance that is Blackness. For me, I haven't learned anything about what Blackness means to me from looking at District 202's discipline records. I haven't learned anything. I haven't learned that we can all come together as the people of color community from engaging in centering whiteness in my own life. I haven't learned anything. I've learned it from the performances of Young Thug. I've learned it from the poetry of Nikki Giovanni. I've learned it from the just Black people that I meet. I learned it when I was taking acting and drumming lessons in Harlem, just in a look or just in a nod or just in a pat on the back, or just these fleeting moments of Black performance in these larger projects of resistance. And hopefully we can start with something that is less clean and more messy and relies more on feeling as opposed to what I would describe as touching.
And then finally, can you tell us a little bit about your intentions using the N-word in your piece?
Yeah, I think that I think a lot of our language is just different ways of avoiding saying the N-word. I think when we say people of color, we're just saying the N-word. When we say, you know, black and brown people, we're just saying the N-word. When we're saying, you know, when we're talking about criminal justice, when we're talking about mass incarceration, we're just saying different places in which the N-word shows up. So why I think for me, using the N-word specifically is a way to get rid of all this baggage, and cut to what we're talking. We're talking about blackness when we say the N-word. I think that the N-word is the blackest word that we have. It calls into being such a specific level. At least for me, it carries so much pain with it. It carries so much heartache with it. It carries so much violence with it, but also carries so much pleasure, and it also carries so much fun, and it carries so much joy, and it carries so much friendship and community. For me, and that's what blackness is in my interpretation of it. You're not able to separate the terror from the moments of beauty. You know, Fred Moten talks about when we attempt to. Fred Moten and Sadia Hartman talk about when we attempt to separate the terror from the beauty, we end up at something that's never able, that doesn't do anything for anyone. And so for me, I use the N-word as a refusal of the other words that are supposed to be options to me. Even blackness now carries such a specific weight to it. You know, people of color carry such a specific weight to it. Black and brown people carry such a specific weight to it. African Americans carry such a specific weight to it. That, and at least for me, and this isn't for anyone else, it's just my own language, they either attempt to separate the terribleness, or they attempt to separate the beauty. The N-word for me is just all of it. I could say all of it in one phrase. It's it all. And so if my larger project or my larger argument or my larger task that I've tasked myself with is refusing the baggage that comes with language, I think the most honest thing that I can do is to start from that. And it might be all of this might be completely wrong. All of it might make no sense, and I might come back, 3 days later, and I completely change my mind with everything. I think it's important for, people in the larger community, specifically the black community, to kind of share with, I don't know, people have said that there's no place for the N-word, and I'd love to engage that, and I hope someone changes my mind. Right, that's the best. I'll look back with this, and like 5 months from now, 5 years from now, whenever, I think that this doesn't make any sense, that I completely disagree with myself now, because it would show some type of engagement or some type of change or some type of work that goes on. None of this is ever correct. It's never the final answer, but I can't always say that. Well, I can say that I've tried my best to be truest, and I can always say that I've tried to start from a place of feeling. Mm-hmm. And so for me, the N-word, now where I am right now, is how I can feel the most.
And then finally, can you give us a preview of the next piece in the series?
The short answer is no, because I think a lot of work is still being done. I think the direction that I want to go is definitely exploring and hopefully delving deeper into my understandings of where once we take the framework that I've tried my best to outline in this article, once we understand that the world relies on anti-black violence, once we understand that the people that we understand as to be human, or the people who understand themselves to be human, can only exist insofar as there's infinite and incalculable amount of violence being done onto blackness. Insofar as we understand that blackness is the chaos that is, pain and joy and beauty and terror. And once we understand that these things cannot change unless the end of the world commences, I hope to unpack and start exploring and using this analysis to explore the ways in which blackness situates itself in my life, whether that's through my own lived experiences, whether that's through history, whether that's through music, whether that's through art, or different things that call themselves to me at different times. I think for me, I always start with where I'm feeling, and what has made itself, or what's presented itself to me. And so now I'm looking back at my own lived experiences and the lived experiences of those who I love and care for on an immediate day-to-day basis as how can I apply this to myself and how can I look deeper into myself and understand myself better, understand those who I share community with. And so hopefully I'm able to kind of expand and grow into that direction.
Mm-hmm.